pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. At this time is the Citizens Forum. This is where anyone from the public can come up and speak on anything not on today's agenda. If you would like to do so, please come up to the podium and give us your name and address.
Mayor and City Council, my name is Dave Miller. Born and raised in Salina, Kansas. I graduated from Salina High School, went out into the world to seek my fortune, and now I'm back to take part in the 125th anniversary of your Salina Municipal Band. And I just wanted to thank the City Council for its support of the band all of these years. In a lot of the communities I've had the privilege to live in, we've had issues trying to support the band. And I know that this city, like most other cities, you have infrastructure problems and personnel issues and need more police and need more fire and fire protection. And so it's easy for something like the municipal band to take a back burner. But when you see the crowds that show up, the baton goes down, the music plays, and the citizens are free to let their imagination run with the music. Every penny that you put into that is worth it. Thank you very much.
Sir, are you a member of the band?
I played in the band for about 3 seasons, and apparently they're going to allow me to play in the band tomorrow night as long as I don't put a reed on my clarinet.
Well, I'm looking forward to hearing them perform tomorrow night. Thank you. Thank you. Any other comments during this time, during the Citizen Forum? If not, we will move on. At this time, I also need a motion to add a certain item to our agenda today.
Mayor, under the administration section, I would move that under item 8.3, we amend that to read that our executive session is for not only trade secrets and personnel reasons, but also for an attorney-client privilege discussion.
Second. It's been moved and seconded that we amend 8.3 under administration for our executive session. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. We have amended that. Continuing on with awards and proclamations.
Item 4.1, Nancy Klostermeyer, President of the Salina Municipal Band Board of Directors, will read a proclamation honoring the Salina Municipal Band's 125th anniversary.
Mayor and Commissioners, whereas Professor Walter H. Packard combined members of several existing organizational bands into the Salina Military Band in 1884, and whereas an organized community band has existed in Salina continuously since that time, and whereas participation in the Salina Municipal Band has evolved to include both men and women from diverse walks of life, including players ranging from teenagers to octogenarians, and whereas the Salina Municipal Band continues to provide free weekly concerts at the Oakdale stage from mid-June through early August, and whereas the Salina Municipal Band provides a wide range of family-oriented entertainment, including marches and patriotic tunes, hits from the big band era, jazz and gospel favorites, Latina rhythms, popular show tunes from Broadway, radio and TV, classical overtures and suites, modern compositions, and numbers featuring instrumental sections and soloists. And whereas the City of Salina has provided financial support for the community band since 1901, including a levy overwhelmingly approved by voters in 1919. And whereas the Salina Municipal Band is one of only 9 remaining municipal bands that were organized in the 19th century in the state of Kansas. And whereas the Salina Municipal Band continues to contribute positively to the musical environment of the city of Salina, including this year's initiation of the Salina Municipal Junior Law Enforcement Band. And whereas the Salina Municipal Band is celebrating the 125th anniversary of its existence with a special August 4th, 2009 concert, funded in part by the Horizons Grants Program of the Salina Arts and Humanities Commission. Therefore, I, Lucy Larson, Mayor of the City of Salina, do hereby issue this proclamation honoring the Salina Municipal Band for providing the citizens of Salina with marches and more since 1884, and urge my fellow residents to join the band at their special 125th anniversary concert at the Eric Stein Stage in Oakdale Park from 8 to 9:30 p.m. on Tuesday, August 4th. Signed this third day of August 2009, Lucy Larson, Mayor.
Besides this wonderful concert tomorrow night, is there anything else commemorating the 125th anniversary? Any other special things?
We don't have any other special events at the moment, but we are really excited about the formation of this junior municipal law enforcement band. It has exceeded everyone's expectations, and it will be continuing on, and there will be more concerts in the future. And we're also excited to have several special guests tomorrow evening with the concert, including Mr. Miller, whose father, C.F. Lebo, was our conductor for a number of years, and we're playing a special march which he composed.
How many members are on the municipal band?
It ranges from 50 to close to 60.
Okay, good. Great. We'll look forward to seeing you tomorrow. I have a signed proclamation for you.
Thank you very much. And I would like to reiterate Mr. Miller's thanks to you all for your continued support of the municipal band.
It's been our pleasure. Okay, moving on to public hearings and items scheduled for a certain time.
Item 5.1, citizen comments on the 2010 budget proposal.
At this time, we will have an informal hearing for the 2010 budget. If anyone wishes to come up and speak regarding the 2010 budget, please give us your name and address.
Could I ask you a question? Is this the one on the property tax increase?
Yes, sir. Step up to the podium. Give us your name and address.
I'm Ernest Cole, 153 South Front, a lifetime member of Salina, Kansas. I've read all in the paper all the reports and reasons why the city is thinking about a property tax increase. And every one of those reasons they give why they want to increase taxes hits the general public the same way. Citizens of Salina, especially the elderly, who are retired, many of them depend on interest rates, interest on savings in order to live, to subsidize their Social Security, myself included. My wife and I have a little bit in savings, and we have seen a drastic decrease in our income because of it. Our utilities and everything went up. The federal government has already announced no increase in Social Security this year for cost of living increase. Everything with the city has went up. Franchise fees, sewer taxes, everything. They've increased everything, but our income is not increasing. And the same is for people that are working on jobs. I've talked to many of them. They're not getting the hours they used to get. They have been cut back, many of them even on their salaries, and yet you're talking about a property tax increase. That's going to hit the poor the hardest, because even those renting pay the property tax. They pay it, maybe not directly to the city, but they pay it to their landlord so that he can pay the property taxes. And if you raise his, he's going to raise theirs. So it's going to affect everybody very inconveniently, And if you want to draw more people into Salina, which I've been hearing over and over and over, they want to get past 50,000, then they better start doing things that are going to welcome people in Salina, not raising taxes in order to run people out. And that's all I got to say about it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cole. Anyone else wish to comment on the 2010 budget during this informal hearing?
I might comment that it's good to see you out, Mr. Cole. Haven't heard you speak for a while, so glad to see you can still get fired up.
If not, we'll proceed to the consent agenda.
Item 6.1, approve the minutes of July 27, 2009.
Mayor, I move we approve the consent agenda.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to accept the consent agenda. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Motion passes 5-0. There's no development business, so we'll go on to administration.
Item 8.1, first reading ordinance number 09-10509, amending sections 8-172 and 8-192 of the Salina Code to modify the requirements for building contractor licensing and amend section 8-191 to replace previous skilled trade license exemptions.
Mr. Roberts.
Thank you, Mayor, Commissioners. Currently, our contractor licensing ordinance requires that in order to obtain a building permit, a contractor has to possess a valid general contracting license or specialty trade license unless they meet some of the very specific exemptions that exist in that licensing ordinance. Contrary to what some people may think, building permits are also required for different types of structures as well as buildings themselves. A couple of those types of structures that the building code requires permits for are fences that are more than 6 feet tall, and retaining walls that are more than 4 feet tall. So consequently, presently under our current licensing requirements, the contractor would have to have a contracting license in order to obtain a permit to do that kind of work. Obviously, our licensing ordinance has been in place for a little over 2 years now, and so we don't get a lot of applications for permits for this kind of work, but we were concerned that perhaps that was not meeting the original intent of the Building Advisory Board when we passed the contractor licensing ordinance. So in June, we brought that item back to them for their reconsideration, specifically to address those topics and to determine whether it was, after all, their intent to require general contractor license in order to do that kind of work. Would also qualify that typically retaining walls, when you think of a retaining wall, you may think of, especially larger retaining walls, that they're poured in place concrete or they're mortared in place masonry, concrete masonry units, bricks. But the requirement would also apply to the dry stacked mortarless landscaping units that you see available from some of the home improvement stores or the Salina Concrete. And so landscapers typically install those kinds of retaining walls. Generally, those are low retaining walls, and they don't necessarily get into higher retaining walls, but they could. And so that's why we brought this question back to the board. In June, as I say, we brought this to the board. They discussed it. The action that they took is reflected in the minutes that we provided a copy of with the agenda packet today. The board agreed that that was not their original intent and recommended an amendment to the licensing ordinance that would only require registration in order for a contractor to do that kind of work. And so we, with the help of City Attorney Greg Bankston, crafted a couple of exemptions that we've included here in the blue sheet for your consideration today that would specifically target those two types of work. Mr. Bankston also felt like that it would be prudent to revise the registration requirements in Section 8-192 so that they were all homogeneous, both the registration and the contracting license sections of that same ordinance. We've also included a copy of the June Building Advisory Board minutes in your packet for your review. In a separate matter related to contractor licensing, we would like to request through this same ordinance that the text regarding exemptions to skilled trade contractor licensing be reinserted last fall when we came to the City Commission and requested a new exemption be placed in there. The other exemptions, when the ordinance was passed, were inadvertently deleted, and we are requesting that those previous exemptions be placed back in the ordinance again. We believe that this conforms to the strategic plan goal number 3, that will provide the highest quality of services consistent with the governing body direction, available resources, and staff commitment to quality. Again, feeling we're taking a proactive part here on the behalf of the contractors to bring this to the board for clarification. And we have outlined the possible options that the City Commission could take. With that, I would be happy to answer any questions that you'd have at this time.
Questions of Mr. Roberts? So I understand this is just basically for addressing the licensing requirements just for this retaining wall.
Retaining walls and fences taller than 6 feet.
6 feet, mm-hmm. Okay.
So the only types of fences here would be wood or chain link. I mean, a brick wall is a retaining wall, not a fence.
No, unless it actually retains something.
Okay, yeah, okay.
So masonry fences would still be exempt from the contractor licensing.
Okay.
Okay. Any other questions? Thank you. I'll open it up for public comment.
Bless you.
If not, I'll bring it back to the commission for action.
Mayor, I'd move we adopt ordinance number 09-10509 as recommended by staff and the Building Advisory Board.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to adopt first reading ordinance number 091-10509, amending sections 8-172 and 8-192 of the Salina Code to modify the requirements of building contractor licensing and amend section 8-191 to replace previous skilled trade license exemptions. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Motion passes. Oh, you know what? I said 5-0. It's 4-0. I forgot that Commissioner Jennings was absent on the other motions. Old habits.
Item 8.2, resolution number 096646, providing notice of a public hearing on the advisability of creating a Sunset Plaza Community Improvement District.
Jason?
Thank you, Mayor and Commissioners. In this legislative session, the state legislature approved the Community Improvement District Act, and you might ask yourself, well, what does that do? Well, it allows cities to create community improvement districts, and what that means is I'll kind of go through the act a little bit, then I'll get specifically to our request today. Basically, in a community improvement district, there are certain things that the funding of that district can go towards. It can go towards construction, demolition, renovation, and maintenance of both private and public infrastructure and buildings and things. So buildings, sidewalks, streets, parking, streetscapes, lighting, landscapes, just about anything you can think of on a piece of property, both public and private. It can go towards provision or contracting for music, news, child care, parking lots, security, cleaning, planning, tourism, recreation or cultural activity, generally economic development and business activity, and employee training. So it's a very, very broad-based tool that was put in place by the state legislature this year. The funding sources that are outlined under the Community Improvement District Act include really two primary funding sources, special assessments, which we can already do, but expands the use of those special assessments when used with what we call a CID. And then a special sales tax, particularly when you have a primarily retail area, you can increase the sales tax in that area, in that district, in increments of 1% or 0.25% up to a maximum of 2%. So whatever the sales tax might be at any given time, if a district is formed in that the state statutes allow for the sales tax to be increased up to 2% more than the existing sales tax today to be put back into the project. This is for a maximum time of 22 years. There can be other funds put in by the city if the city so chooses, or any combination of those. Kind of one of the interesting things with regards to special assessments is that in this case, no portion of the special assessments may be paid by the city at large. Under the special assessment law, the city can participate in projects if they choose to, but under the CID, they cannot do that. So it's purely with the property that's in question. Some financing alternatives. How do you finance a project? Well, pay as you go. For example, if there's a shopping center and they want to go out and get their own private loan, they can do that, and then the city is a conduit for money that just flows through us, say from a special sales tax, and we forward it over to them to be used in accordance with the statute. The city can issue bonds if we choose to do that. We can issue general obligation bonds, which are backed by the full faith and credit of the city and the city's property taxes, in essence, or we can issue special obligation bonds, which are not backed in that way. There are various methods to form a CID. If it's a special assessment district without bond financing, it has to be formed by the signature of all property owners within the proposed district. If it's a CAD that uses a sales tax, full faith and credit financing, then owners of 55% of the land area and 55% of the assessed value of the property is all it takes to finance that. You look at that, it's kind of odd on the logic behind the difference of those two, in my opinion, but that's the way it's set up. Once a valid petition is received, the process basically is that the governing body adopt a resolution calling for a public hearing on the advisability of creating the CID. There's a publication and notice of the public hearing twice in the newspaper. Notification of all property owners within the proposed CID via certified mail. You conduct the public hearing, and an adoption of a resolution or ordinance authorizing the CID, approving the cost estimate, levying the CID sales tax if applicable, approving the amount of any special assessments, and approving the method of financing. There's a 30-day statute of limitation. So it's a fairly simple process, actually, that runs a process not a lot different than, say, a special assessment process. The request we have is from the owners of Sunset Plaza, who have submitted a petition to create a community improvement district. Their intent is to levy a 1% increase in the sales tax to finance just over $12 million in improvements to the Sunset Plaza. Some of you may notice out there, there was a fire a few months ago, and there was repair on the portion of the plaza on the east side of that development, and they want to take that look and bring it around and do a lot of other improvements in the parking areas and so forth. They're looking at a pay-as-you-go basis, so we're not looking at issuing any debt in any form, whether it be GO or special obligation. They're looking at 22 years, or as long as it takes for the sales tax to actually get to the improvement amount of $12,264,920. Based on the process at hand, the first step for the governing body is simply to adopt a resolution that's put before you that sets the date and time of the required public hearing. So there's no adoption or anything like that today. The only action today is simply to set that public hearing date that's provided for in the public hearing. The other thing we've added to the process is we felt it was important that the owners notify, if it's a single owner, in this case it is, that they notify tenants, because the Act doesn't provide for notification of tenants, just that all the landowners are notified by the city. So we felt that it's important to notify tenants, so we've informed them that we'd like them to do that. And they actually told us that they have had conversations with some and possibly all the tenants, so that seems to be fine. When we look at this, we do believe that the concept fits within our strategic plan. We think that the project, if it goes forward, would be a pretty nice project for that particular development. Certainly there's some things that you'll need to consider between now and the time that you would actually take formal action on the project. With regards to the fiscal impact, for this action there's no fiscal impact, just because you're setting the date and time of the public hearing, and that's really it. So we have before you the recommended action is to adopt resolution number 09-6646, setting the date and time for a public hearing to determine the advisability of creating the Sunset Plaza Community Improvement District. I'd be happy to take questions about this action or really any aspect of that if you have any.
Questions of Mr. Gage?
I'm curious if this is something that we ought to, as a city, have more of a formal policy on, sort of like TIF districts. And I say that because I have concerns about community improvement districts being used in the private sector. And I realize this is kind of a volume deal where the actual burden on the taxpayer is just nickels and dimes. At the same time, basically it's an increase in taxes for the general public to improve a private business person's ventures. And I guess that troubles me a little bit. I wonder, it's more appealing to me when this type of funding is used for a public project instead of a private project. And as it sits now, potentially I would think there could be 15 or 20 different strip malls or other areas in the community that would like to enhance their landscaping or whatever else they want to do, and simply nickel and dime the citizens of Salina to basically improve a person's real estate. And then at the end of that, I suppose after those improvements are made, that person has realized a nice appreciation on their real estate value, and they could simply sell at that point, and we've funded their increased value. I guess maybe Mr. Lawver would like to comment on that. I've expressed that my hesitation before to him, but any comments on that?
Yeah, we have talked about a policy on this as well as TIF and some of the other tools. This one, of course, is right out of the chute, being effective in July. So this is pretty early in the process. I think one of the things we looked at is we kind of weighed, and first we said, the first thing we looked at is the risk to local government, which in a pay-as-you-go there really isn't much. So that kind of helps answer that question. If we were issuing GO bonds, it would be a whole different story. And then you do look at the private sector, and we basically anticipated that one of the factors you as a commission may be interested in is didn't really anticipate the taxpayer perspective as much as the effect that a land owner or development owner could have on their tenants. And so that's one reason we put in the requirement that they contact their tenants, just to make sure that happens, because there's always perspective about does it affect sales and so forth. Ultimately, I think we kind of looked at it and said, if because the services, the things that are sold at that development can also be sold in other places in the community, it's kind of a buyer's choice situation, and ultimately the developer can look at that, or in this case, owner can say, do we believe it'll hurt sales or help sales? And I don't believe they think in any way it'll hurt sales. And again, based on the taxpayer's choice to go in and pay that sales tax, certainly the taxpayer would have to, whether they know there's a higher sales tax till after they have a transaction, I don't know. But they get to choose where they want to go spend their money. So we kind of felt that maybe that was a private sector, private market question. I think it's a good question, though, something you may want to consider. But that's kind of how we looked at it more. So it is a good way of leveraging, and it's a good way of them taking on that risk to do that. So from that perspective, it's kind of nice, and it doesn't lock in the public and any kind of public dollars coming in directly from the local government budget. So there's some good aspects related to that side of it. It doesn't drain our budget. But certainly you're right. There is a higher tax. It's for that development, and someone would pay that. And then the question is do you want to give them that opportunity and let the consumer then choose if they want to do that?
Well, truthfully, I'd love to hear from the owner's perspective as well, because I as much as I would like to see, say, the Sunset Dillon shopping area improved, I use that all the time. I just like to hear from an owner's perspective, where does their responsibility for improvements to that property end, and in their opinion, and how they justify pushing that on to the taxpayer.
Dennis Lawver from the Salina Chamber of Commerce. I cannot speak for Mr. Lawver's opinion. He lives in Wichita and is my father, but I'll be happy to answer your question, Aaron. I'm sure he'd say that it's a really good idea. Seriously, I think one of the, you ask a legitimate point about accepting a policy, and I've indicated to Jason that I would be taking the information that was part of that presentation we made in the middle of July and really getting that down into paper. And that's actually that is the only, my stack of stuff associated with that is this thick and is the only thing currently sitting on my desktop other than the computer. And my schedule tomorrow will involve really starting to finally, in earnest, putting some ink down on paper in terms of getting kind of a policy recommendation to lay that out. So there's kind of a clear standard on that, as you referenced also with TIF and some of the other ideas. I think on the public hearing, should you agree to go ahead and set the hearing on it for the 24th of August, the owner will be here and have that opportunity to answer your questions from their perspective. I think it's important to consider, and I'd certainly make that comment again on the 24th. Aaron, you need to look at the alternative of what if this didn't happen? And would you see a property not have investment? Would you see disinvestment occur in a property? And from a pure dollars and cents point of view, is the value of a property would decline. Obviously, property tax dollars generated back by that property would be less. $100,000 building obviously generates less property tax dollars than a $150,000 building. And this becomes a very real economical method for somebody to improve an aging facility. And typically that is how you see, typically, but not always, but typically that is how you see community investment or community improvement districts used across America. It is for a first generation retail development that's about to make that turn to a second generation development, and when you don't want it to deteriorate, and it makes it just becomes a way for the owner to do that. So
yeah, it's still a matter of principle for me. I certainly understand.
I understand that, and you and I have talked about that before, and that certainly is an issue, but in your perspective. But anyway, you'll have that opportunity. Okay. Should you agree to the public hearing to ask the project owner.
Commissioner, one other aspect to think about too is that here we're dealing with the owner and not the tenants directly per se, because they haven't applied, the owner has. But as we know from time to time, when you're in retail business, your prices do change over time for various reasons. And in this particular case, if you're the consumer, whether the price went up because the actual price went up or the sales tax went up, doesn't make a difference. At some point you're going to have a price point whether you want to buy or not buy. So you still feel the impact whether it's a price of a product going up or whether there's a 1% increase in the sales tax. The difference here is that it's probably more definable as to what that amount is across the board, and also it goes to a particular purpose, whereas if there's just a price increase, it may not be definable and it may not go towards a specific purpose there. So there's a little bit of public benefit that comes out of that, just from the perspective of how that retail shopping center looks in our community, and you do have the ability to look on your receipt and say, I did pay a little bit more, and you do have the ability to contact us and say this is what it went for. If a particular store just increases their price, you don't have that ability. So there's little knowledge on this.
Likely they're going to, it's going to be just double the increase instead of maybe just a general price increase.
You will have the opportunity to hear from the retailers there.
It takes the mystery out of that, I guess, is really the point.
Yeah.
That was my question. Is it going to be a separate line item on the receipt, or is it all going to be taxed in together, and what's the mechanism that's going to divide or separate that out?
I don't know exactly at this point what the receipt will look like, but there's no question it will have to show the full sales tax. Whether it'll be separated out with general sales tax and like CID sales tax, I'm not sure. I'm going to presume that it'll just have the tax rate, and it'll be the total tax rate, which would be 1% higher than what it would otherwise be.
Right. How many owners are in that property? Is it one owner? And approximately how many tenants then do you have there?
That information, I know I've seen their draft petition, which is about that thick that they've put together, and all that information is in there. My assumption is in advance of you taking action, at some point get a copy of that petition, but,
Well, just guess, since
Dozen
you're
or so,
probably more in
yeah.
touch than I am.
yeah, I would think a dozen might be the appropriate number.
Okay,
And obviously, the two largest generators of retail activity, taxable retail activity, is the grocery store and the fast food restaurant.
okay, that was going to be my next question. That restaurant is included because it's on the grounds of the,
Yes, and you'll hear from the owner of that facility's enthusiastic support.
okay. Any other questions of Mr. Gage or Mr. Lover?
I do.
That's my dad.
Maybe it's getting the cart before the horse, but how do we account for all the funding? You know, what kind of an account does it go to, and how do we measure the results of that in terms of being spent on the infrastructure and not?
Right. Yeah, I think we will run it. You know, recently we had the Coles project, and in that there's a defined project, and in this there'll be a defined project. And statutorily, if there's an obligation we have, is to make sure that we don't release funds until we're certain that the funds that they're spent are for a certain project. So we'll have a mechanism in place to make sure that the funds are for what they're intended to be for in this project. And if there's any amendment to that may be allowable under the statute, that would have to come before the governing body.
And remember, Tom, they're taking on the burden themselves, so obviously you're going to see the activity occur up front, and then it's a pay-as-you-go or paying themselves back over time.
Okay.
So it'll be pretty easy to tell right away that
Absolutely.
Yeah.
improvements were made and made as will be promised to you.
To me, kind of going back to what the Vice Mayor was saying, it just sounds a little, since this is the first one, if everybody, there's got to be some criteria that they'll probably meet, and there's going to have to be some kind of guidelines, because to me, it just sounds kind of confusing how one area is going to charge, 0.10, and over here it's 0.15, and over there is
Studies have been done that,
Two
and I'd be
and-
happy to advance those, showing that in other communities where this sort of a mechanism exists in other states, that has not negatively impacted shopping patterns at all.
Okay,
Yeah, the other thing,
And-
the structure they used of this is similar to what's called a transportation development district. That was basically the same type of tool, but a more narrowed focus on what you could use it for. So that structure has been in place in Kansas even for some time, and is used pretty highly in Missouri and other states. So the tools have been used in other places.
okay.
Well, the shopping pattern studies, I don't think can be that telling, or I wouldn't think they would be that telling, I suppose. I know if at 9 o'clock at night I'm out of baby wipes, I'm running to Sunset Dillon's. I'm not going to go to Dillon's Superstore because it's going to save me 2 cents. I think it's still a matter of convenience and practicality of where you're going to shop, but it doesn't make it sit any better. But anyway.
Yeah, I
would
look
think
forward to
that-
talking
and
to
I
the
would encourage
tenants.
you- Yeah, and I would encourage you, if I don't know protocol, but if you have the opportunity to meet with the owners perhaps out at the site and have them a chance to point and explain, that can help address some of those questions too.
Okay.
I don't anticipate there being a big drop in sales, but should there be, is there a procedure by which they can come in and terminate the community improvement district at an earlier time than what they've asked for?
And what happens to that money that's already been created?
That's a good question. I don't believe in the statute there is. I'll look at that. I don't think there is. I'm not sure that means that we can't. But I think if we did, we would probably have to look at the monies brought in to that time, for that time frame, and make sure that those have gone towards improvements that they're intended to be, that they intended to support. So we'll take a close look at that just to make sure.
Yeah, I would assume some sort of a performance clause does in fact go back to kind of that broader policy area and make sure they're really done what they're saying they're going to do. Now, and again, in this case, because they're taking on the financial burden themselves, you'll know pretty soon right away whether they've done what they said they will do. So,
One other quick question, I guess, in looking at these districts, and maybe it was in here and I didn't see, how are we able to define boundaries? Is that just however we want to create them?
In this case, it's easy because there's the parcel or one or two parcels that are all under the same ownership.
Sure.
But in
Downtown, for instance.
Yeah, in a multiple owner scenario, you would be looking at probably looking at the scenario where you have 55% of those who of the property owners and of the assessed value in place. So it's a somewhat similar to a special assessment district at that point in time, which means in that case that as long as 55% threshold is met, that others could be forced into the district. So any time you have a multi-owner situation, that's going to be one of the scenarios that you have to deal with. In this case, it's not. But we still think it's important to balance the needs of the tenants, even though they don't have those individual rights that are provided to the owners under the statute.
And again, typically you'll find tenants be actually supportive of it because the alternative is either deterioration of the physical structure or increased rents and an increased CAM payment. And so they'll look and say, given that, they prefer this as the method.
However, they're likely to realize increased rents at some point in the near future after these improvements are made anyway.
But in that case, that's probably earning a cost that would have, or an increase that would have occurred anyway. So as opposed to going up from the baseline to here, then you're describing a situation where it would have gone here up to here.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's hard to tell when the owner comes in, when you get to that point, they may say that this tool allows them not to change rents when that opportunity comes in order to do improvements. Now, whether that's what their intention is or not, I don't know, but it certainly does provide a means to do a project that is just a different way of funding it.
Yeah.
And so what is the timeline? Today is just to,
Today is just simply to approve the resolution that sets the date for the public hearing.
and are we looking at the 24th of August?
Yes, August
Okay.
24th for the public hearing. That's
Okay.
correct.
Any other questions of Mr. Gage or Mr. Lawver? If not, we kind of did that backwards, but I'll open it up to public comment if there's anyone out there that wishes to speak on this today. Please step forward. Okay, if not, I'll bring it back to the commission for action.
Mayor, I'd move we adopt resolution number 09-6646, setting a date of August 24th at our 4 o'clock meeting for the time to have a public hearing to determine the advisability of creating the Sunset Plaza Community Improvement District.
Second?
It's been moved and seconded that we adopt resolution number 09-6646, providing notice of a public hearing scheduled for August the 24th on the advisability of creating the Sunset Plaza Community Improvement District. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Motion passes 4-0.
Mayor, I'd move we recess into executive session for 30 minutes to discuss with legal counsel matters subject to the attorney-client privilege for the reason that public discussion of those matters would waive the privilege and adversely affect the city's interest, and also to discuss confidential data relating to the financial affairs and trade secrets of a corporation for the reason that public discussion of the information would competitively disadvantage the corporation, and reconvene at 5:12 p.m.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that we recess in executive session. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We're in executive session. Do we anticipate any action?
We do not.
No action. John, you still do that one.